All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, Senator Bernie Sanders, he's in the fight of his political life. His establishment has chosen their man, Biden. They swept Super Tuesday states, at least from a media perspective. And the single greatest threat to his main rival has bowed out of the race and pledged his multi-billion-dollar fortune and organization towards getting him elected. How is the senator, crowing about revolutionary change, responded at a moment where he needs to throw every punch he can possibly muster against Biden? Well, with this.
They want a serious debate on serious issues. Joe Biden is somebody I have known for many years. I like Joe. I think he's a very decent human being. Joe and I have a very different voting record. Joe and I have a very different vision for the future of this country. And Joe and I are running very different campaigns. And I like Joe. Joe is a decent guy, and I do not want this campaign to degenerate into a Trump-type effort where we're attacking each other, where it's personal attacks. That is the last thing this country wants.
As I said yesterday, Bernie is a guy who goes around talking about revolution. He tells us the threat of globalization, financialization, is graver than ever. Yet, he can't act like it. He cannot utter a sentence about Joe Biden without talking about how wonderful the man is, how great of a guy he is, how they just happen to disagree on policy. The mismatch of his rhetoric to how he actually fights is enough evidence that you might need as to whether he'd actually fight for anything that he says he will. And Sanders goes around saying that he's a threat to the Democratic establishment, and then he spends all of his time kowtowing to their demands of him. Anyone with a brain can see that Elizabeth Warren staying in the race on Super Tuesday almost certainly cost Sanders delegates and contributed to a media environment which has anointed Joe Biden the Democratic frontrunner. Yet, when a reporter asks him if he's okay with one of his supporters expressing their annoyance with Warren and asking for her to drop out, what does he say?
She will make her own decision in her own time. And in terms of vitriol on the online, I'm disgusted by it. All right. Look, I think the Twitter world is an opportunity for people to debate issues, have good, honest debates about issues, but not to make vitriolic attacks on somebody because you disagree with them.
Frankly, this validates what I've said about Sanders from the very beginning of this race. As early viewers of this show know, he talks a really big game. But ultimately, he refuses to attack the actual establishment figures like Joe Biden, who he tells us daily are the ones who ruined this country, empowered the financial elites, and sent our young men and women to go and die in Middle Eastern wars. Not only does he refuse to attack them, he bows before them. He bows before bad faith attacks from the media to disavow Bernie bros. And he talks about how much he respects the woman who lied about him calling her a sexist. And then he has ruined his best chance at the presidency. It's really just pathetic behavior. Sanders is trying to show some backbone, but it's probably too late. Yesterday, he released some negative ads about Joe Biden, which are going to air in Florida and other strategic areas for the race. But they're literally the first negative ads that Sanders has run this cycle against Biden. How is it we're this late into the primary process, and the Sanders campaign is only now trying to back up their attacks on Biden with actual money? To give people a reminder, this is how upstart progressive Barack Obama talked about Joe Biden, establishment equivalent Hillary Clinton, ahead of the South Carolina primary.
It's what's wrong with politics today. Hillary Clinton will say anything to get elected. Now she's making false attacks on Barack Obama. The Washington Post says Clinton isn't telling the truth. She championed NAFTA, even though it has cost South Carolina thousands of jobs. And worst of all, it was Hillary Clinton who voted for George Bush's war in Iraq. Hillary Clinton, she'll say anything and change nothing. It's time to turn the page.
Bernie has not exhibited any of that energy since the day he started his campaign in 2015. He refused to talk about Hillary's emails and the Clinton Foundation. He campaigned for her only to have her turn around and blame him for her loss. He stood by while Elizabeth Warren stole his thunder, refused to attack her and for stealing his position, and then running with it for months. He can't even bring himself to even defend his honor and call her a liar. And when his own campaign surrogate correctly called Joe Biden corrupt, he apologized to Joe. The script for how he would fold in a real test of a fight has always been there, and it's no surprise to see him do it again. It's a reminder of why Donald Trump, for all of his flaws, is a boon to the populist right. Nobody else ever fought as hard as he could for the people who have not had a voice in decades. And this goes to a central critique that I have of Sanders and the way he's handled this, the Clyburn thing, everything, which is that He refuses to adopt the existentialism of what he talks about every single day. If Joe Biden is a singular existential threat to this country, if corruption in this country is a single existential threat to our political system, why can't you talk about Hunter Biden? If it truly is a massive blow to working people for Donald Trump to get reelected or for Joe Biden to become president again, why can he not act like it? And I mean, his people would back him.
Yeah.
The majority of the country is with him, actually, and with Trump whenever they talk about the corrupt elites. I mean,
well, if you really want to talk about bringing new people into the process.
That's exactly what I was about to say. How do you bring new people into the process? These suburban primary voters, they don't like Bernie. Oh, they like Bernie. They ain't going to vote for Bernie, especially now that Obama and the rest of the Democratic establishment have given them permission to vote for Biden.
Well, I think two things. First of all, you can't say he needs to be harder and he needs to take the fight and also say he should be sucking up to Jim Clyburn. Like, you got to pick either one.
But he won't
right?
do
it.
Yeah.
You can't say that you should
do either.
Both,
yeah.
Right? You got to pick one or the other. And it strikes me, first of all, I think he has let the rhetoric, the very disingenuous rhetoric of the Democratic establishment, neoliberals, get in his head about divisiveness and about attacks and, oh, we're so mad at you because you're the one who caught. Like, they took too much of that on and are too worried about the perception of if they're too aggressive. I think that's one part. I think the other part is just not really in his nature. I mean, as you point out with Hillary Clinton, you know, who wasn't really a good friend. I mean, I think he genuinely has like friendly, warm feelings towards Joe Biden. I don't think he really had that towards Hillary Clinton. And still he was deferential on these issues that ended up being a massive problem for her in the general election and didn't do Democratic voters any favors by not prosecuting that case against her in the primary. It doesn't do Democratic voters any favors by letting Joe Biden off the hook on these issues, which are real issues. I think that you have to, at this point, recognize that reality, right? It reminds me of the way that Obama and Joe Biden, frankly, never viewed the Republicans as the enemies that they really were, even though the Republicans always viewed them. Mitch McConnell, they always viewed Obama as nothing, as an enemy. Like, they were totally clear-eyed about that. And yet Obama and Joe Biden, they kept going back to the table. They believe in the civility politics. I mean, over and over again, how many times they go to the table looking for the frickin' grand bargain. And so Bernie Sanders, for all of his, let's not have vitriol, let's not, let's not have personal attacks, et cetera, on the other side, those rules aren't going to be respected.
They don't care.
They have knifed him. They will knife him. They'll do it again in a heartbeat without hesitation.
That's what I'm getting at, which is that this divisiveness, civility, it all flows one way, right? I mean, look, I
always,
frankly,
it only goes one way.
He's always like, oh, my supporters, it's disgusting, vitriol. It's like, so you have you can call out disgusting vitriol for the people that apparently support you, but you can't call out Joe Biden's record. And I mean, really call it out. Talk about the hypocrisy of having your son serve on the Amtrak board and for a credit card company while you go and you pass legislation which benefits that company. That is what he is running at. That is the core of what he says he's running against, and he can't call it out. And, you know, with the Clyburn thing, like I said, if you're not going to do this, if you're not going to do what I'm talking about, because this works, this is how Donald Trump became president of the United States. If you don't want to do that, then you have to play the political game.
Yeah.
You have to do.
And the truth of the matter is, though, you're never gonna succeed playing the political game.
No, I mean, I would indict that entire mode of politics. It's a false direction. Like, it's a dead-end direction. They may say nice things to your face. They're never going to get behind you. They're not going to endorse you. The best you could do is, he did have a moment after Nevada when he has this big win and this broad coalition. People are like, oh, my God, this guy's a juggernaut and he can't be defeated. There was an opportunity to pick up craven, like, bandwagon jumpers. The de Blasio's, yeah.
Right. There was an opportunity for that to happen that they didn't press and pursue at that moment. That was a massive mistake. But I think to even imagine that you would be able to be successful playing the political game is a fantasy.
Look, like I said, I think it's a fool's errand from the beginning. But if you want to do it, at least try, and maybe you prevent the Clyburn thing. And this is, again, I mean, what Trump did was so genius in retrospect, while making it so existential for if the Republican establishment did try and screw him, right? Like, he made it known, that very first debate, the very first question that Bret Baier asked all the candidates, raise your hand if you will not support the eventual Republican nominee. Only Trump did it.
Yeah.
And by doing that, he knew that his movement, the millions of people who supported him in the campaign and in the primary had to be reckoned with as a force.
Right.
Now, Sanders, I mean, look, I give him credit here all the time on this show, which is that he built this huge youthful organization, massive fundraising powerhouse, organizational machine that has not been seen since 2008. And, Ryan Grimm, the title of his book, We've Got People. When is the last time Sanders tried to leverage what he actually has in order to get power?
Right.
Why didn't he go to Jim Clyburn and be like, if you do this, you are screwing over my people? People, who do we talk about all the time? These janitors and these Amazon workers and these Walmart workers and all these low-paid employees who work night shift, third shift, shift work, and they give money to Sanders because they believe in what he's saying. And they do that because he wants them to represent their voice. But part of doing that is actually fighting for their interest in the party that you purport to be a part of.
Well, the most powerful argument he could make right now is basically saying the young people that back me, they don't back the Democratic Party.
Right.
They back me because of Medicare for All, Green New Deal in particular, right? Do you think that these Sunrise Movement kids who are out there organizing for me on the Green New Deal, you think they're going to vote for Joe Biden? You're insane.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The older voters, and this is where there is a real generational divide. Older voters, first, second, third, fourth, fifth issue is beating Trump. Period. End of story. That's what it's all about for them. Younger voters aren't like that.
No, I mean, the people
Younger
who watch
voters
this
are
show
not like that. And so if
Yeah.
you want them to show up, you have to give them a candidate who backs their values. Otherwise, they're not coming to the polls and you're losing to Trump.
It's not just young voters. It's actual swing voters, people on the fence who didn't vote in 2016 or
Right.
who are considering voting or who voted for Trump and are considering and who vote purely based on their working class interests. Well, those people aren't going to vote for the Democrats either. It's like, listen, I mean, the party, the Democratic Party made a decision to go all in on this suburban vote. And that's great for winning House races, but it's not great for actually winning the presidency.
No.
And Sanders knows this better than anybody.
Right.
And yet, you hear nothing.
Yeah. No, they have to understand, and the suburban voters have to understand that without Sanders' people, that he has this movement behind him. And if you don't have that movement, you are going to lose to Donald Trump. That's the case that needs to be made loud and clear. Next up on Rising, Hillary Clinton said she would not endorse anyone in the 2020 race, but she's made her feelings on Bernie Sanders very clear. Those comments on Rising continues.